Hi, Dad. I want to talk about the counter-radicalization stuff that I've been doing, and to briefly acknowledge the fact I had a conversation with an academic who specializes in terrorism and predicting those kinds of events and that sort of stuff, and I said to him that. That I'd been doing some de-radicalization stuff, um, and he kind of got excited, and I found myself watching videos of the first American to join Al Qaeda, who was later arrested, and there's a lot of people who are very interested in understanding his story, and and I turned and we then had this conversation. I'm like, well, no, actually, I don't talk to people who've joined a terrorist organization and get them out. What I try to do is what I tried to do. And past tense, there's some foreshadowing. What I tried to do was to talk to people who I thought were at risk of joining or participating in terrorist acts and influencing them to do something better with their lives. And I then learned that counter-radicalization is is the preventative stuff, and de-radicalization is what you do when someone has been radicalized and takes them back. So, hence counter-radicalization. I've done an amount of it. I'm proud of some of the things that I've achieved, and I'm not going to do it anymore. And that's what I want to cover in this. I know you don't have questions. If other people have questions, I do actually really like comments and questions. I'm kind of hoping that there's people who either want to fight me on this topic or who are genuinely interested in doing stuff like that themselves. Okay. So my very first experience with this kind of stuff would have been in fourth grade. This is the experience that set me up for it anyway. Actually, third grade, sorry. So I was much smaller. I was a year younger than all of the other third graders, and I was bullied occasionally. And there was one day where some kids from a higher grade, he was having a bad day or something, and he thought that getting me humiliated was going to cheer him up. And so he set about doing that, and I was really, really angry about this, and I thought that I would get revenge on him. And it's worth noting that there was this one kid who was bullying me, and he had a friend with him who was kind of undecided about the whole bullying thing. He was kind of joining in, but not much. And so there was this game that kids in my school would play. We had these drinking fountains, bubblers we called them in Australia. We had these bubblers, and so you could go and you could get some water and have something to drink during lunchtime in school. And the game that the little kids would do is you would go to the bubbler and you would take a drink of water, and then you would puff out your cheeks, and you would invite the person that you were challenging to squeeze your cheeks together with their fingers. And the mouth was always empty. And that was the gag, was that, are you a chicken and going to squeeze the person's cheeks together or not? And this kid, I'm like 6 or 7 years old, and he's like 9 or 10. I cannot compete with him intellectually or physically. But for some reason, I got it into my head that I could win at this game. So I went to the bubbler and I pressed the button and the water came into my mouth and I turned to him. And his friend, who didn't really care who was getting embarrassed that day, he just wanted to see someone getting embarrassed. He was like, do it, do it. And the guy who was actually bullying me was like, I don't know, it looks like he might actually have water in there. Um, and I was like, um, and this went on for, for quite some time. And eventually the guy realized that he couldn't not do the thing of pushing my cheeks together without looking like a coward. Um, and so he pushed my cheeks together, and my mouth was actually completely full with all of the water that I could load into it. And so this giant stream of water pops out, lands on the ground nearby. He, did it at a safe distance. Right? I tried to get him with it. I missed. Um, and and the sidekick just fell apart laughing. He thought it was the best thing ever. And the main guy was like, yeah, okay, we've all had some fun here, and class is going to be starting soon, and we'll just go. And he was like, okay, we can all laugh, and I joined in on the laughing. It was such a cool experience. There I was, terrified, and then I had taken control of the situation by making a joke out of it, and so there were and there were two lessons that I picked up from that, which have influenced all of my interactions. I haven't always paid attention to it, but it's been there for my entire life since then, which is that bullies are looking for stress relief, right? When I was a bully, I was definitely looking for stress relief. Later in life, when I eventually found some kids smaller than me, I was shit in some ways, and I did bully those kids. I should. My wife is right about my eyebrows; they're very distracting. Um, but if you can get them, if you can be cool, right? There was something cool about this little kid who played the game. Um, and bullies won't go after someone who's cool. That was the first thing that I twigged to. And the other was that you can get the allies of the bully to turn against the bully if you get it right. Oh, sorry. um, and and I'm just going to pause this. I think my wife might want to talk to me. So yeah, not only do you have this thing where people you can if you're cool, they won't come after you, but the other thing is that if you recruit the henchman away from the lead bully, then that gives you a measure of safety as well. Next experience that I had was in 2004. So what am I? I'm 28 at this point. And I am a dragon, by the way. We'll talk about the spiritual significance of that some other time. But if you look at this rather awesome wedding ring that I am having difficulty positioning in front, take it off. That there is two intertwined dragons, and that is my wedding ring, and it symbolizes myself and my wife. I'm a dragon, and as we know, if you believe something weird on the internet, then there are people who will come after you. And there was people who started coming after people who identify as mythical creatures. You may have heard the term otherkin to describe those people. And they were organised into packs of bullies, and they were coming after people. And I happened to be part of a community that was about putting down people who have stupid spiritual views. And that community became an organising place for the people who were coming after the otherkin. And so I wasn't thrilled that these people were coming after me and my kind, and organising it in a space where I was a participant. And so I wrote a post saying, seems like a good opportunity to say some things about being otherkin. And I explained that it is spiritually valid, and a whole bunch of, defenses of that position that that are off topic for this video. And people came after me. Of course they did. I remember, and so this is not too long after I had separated from my first wife, and one of the comments was, have you considered the possibility that you're batshit insane? And it's like textbook trolling, that question. Yeah? It's a question. So if you don't answer it, then you're being rude and defensive. But he hasn't accused me of being insane. He's just asking me if I've considered the possibility. Right? It's a really nice provocation as far as trolling technique is concerned. And the way that I often prefer to, and so I needed to reply in a way that was cool, right? That suggested that my opponents were uncool. That was what was happening there. And so I replied, yes, I have, but my psychiatrist tells me that my problems have got much more to do with the breakup of my marriage and nothing really to do with any unusual spiritual beliefs that I might have. Which is true, by the way. When you use the truth, it often helps. And I was actually pretty surprised when my psychiatrist told me that this belief that I was a dragon wasn't a delusion. And I've been learning a lot about mental health since 2004, I can guarantee you that. Anyway, that was kind of typical of the interactions that I had over the next few days as people came at me as hard as they could. And I defused, fought against, ridiculed, presented myself as a fundamentally cool and sane person who didn't deserve to be ridiculed simply because I had some weird beliefs. And that's true of everyone, I think. Or at least, no, there are some very stupid people who believe some weird things. There are also some very stupid people who believe some very ordinary things. It's a very bad predictor of that sort of thing. But then I had I had a person tell me that they were the victim of their early success, and I became the victim of my early success because the leader of the gang of trolls wrote an apology and said, you know what, this is actually a perfectly legitimate spiritual belief. These people don't deserve to be targeted. We should stop. And I thought that was fantastic that he had done that, and I told him that I thought that it was fantastic. And we never spoke each other again, but I have some affection for him because he did that cool thing and because he recognized that his behavior was wrong and he was willing to change it. Something you should have considered when you were alive, Dad. Anyway. So that got me hooked on it. And then I got off social media. Social media is not necessarily very good for people. And I got back on after being away for years. I was kind of out of practice. And then I did this around the time of the rise of toxic online masculinity, Gamergate, and Jordan. Jordan Peterson's really interesting, and I don't know how many episodes we'll need to in order to cover Jordan Peterson, um, but I remember I was participating in a Jordan Peterson fan group, and played a role in turning that into something that was genuinely open-minded and wasn't simply a recruiting ground for Nazis. I was pleased about that. I It's difficult to shut me up sometimes about how I closed down neo-Nazi recruiting campaigns in the suburb where I live, which is where the so-called African gangs crisis happened. The stormiest teacup that was ever inflated into a media frenzy by Rupert Murdoch and his employees. Um, but I I played a role in terms of communicating with the leaders of the local Facebook groups, the moderators, and they made a decision to kick out the Nazis, and thanked me for showing them what assholes the Nazis were. Now, when I say Nazis, I'm talking about here people who have a picture of Hitler in their meeting room. There's nothing metaphorical or exaggerated about that. There's documentaries that I can link to if anyone really wants proof of what those people are like. Anyway, there were also smaller successes. There was a guy who was talking about how women are terrible, and a lot of red pill stuff. And I looked at him and I thought, he just needs realistic expectations and some encouragement. And so, it turned out that there was this girl that he liked, and I was like, why don't you ask her out? And he's like, well, I don't know how to do that. And so I talked to him about, I mean, I am I am not great. I am not great at starting relationships. Staying in relationships, I can do that. Starting them, there are other people who are much better equipped to be dating coaches than I am. But I'm better than anyone in the red pill group, and they're complete pig, ignorant, stupid garbage. And so basic things like invite the girl to a public place to do an activity that you both enjoy, say that you're going anyway, and ask her if she wants to come along. And if she doesn't come along, go anyway to something that you actually enjoy and have a good time on your own. That was the advice that I gave. And it changed this poor kid's life for the better. So hooray for that. And there's one less incel in the world because of it. So good. And it cost me to be having conversations with the Jordan Peterson fan group and with incels and with people who said nasty things about trans people. If they were right about anything and I agreed with them, then I was accused of siding with the enemy. If they came onto my Facebook page and said something, then I replied saying you're wrong about that, then I was platforming them apparently. And there are good, decent people I respect who won't talk to me anymore because I did that. But I'm not the most successful anti-radicalization person in the world. Counter-radicalization, we could call it. I mean, Daryl Davis is one of my favorite people, and he did actually de-radicalize people, but he uses the same basic approach that I did, and my approach is informed by paying attention to his behavior. He is a black man, and he made friends with the head of the local KKK, and after a few years, the entire local KKK in his state quit. They gave him their hoods and cloaks for his trophy cabinet, and said, "We realize now that what we're doing is wrong. We're not going to do it anymore." Um, and I spent a particularly ill-advised year of my life saying to everyone that you should be like Daryl Davis. I'm trying to be like Daryl Davis, and you should do that too. And I would love it if everyone did that, but I'm not going to do it anymore. And I think that gives me far more sympathy for the people who never did it than what I used to have. What you need in order to succeed at these efforts is a question. So Daryl Davis's question was, why do you hate me? He genuinely wanted to know the answer to that question, and that was why he invited the head of the KKK to a meeting, so that he could ask him that question. And Daryl Davis's own story about that meeting is, go watch that. It's great stuff. And I had my question was, how can I get good enough at handling these kinds of things that I can have the relationship I want with my father? And there were two things that were the end of me using counter-radicalization efforts for that objective. The first thing was, I was talking to a Nazi, someone who stated that the mentally defective and gender confused, people like me, should be exterminated in order to preserve the gene pool. He seemed pretty sincere in what he was saying, and he was expressing it in ways that weren't necessarily very polite. And I said to him, I'm trying to discuss your ideas with you, but when you make personal attacks and insults on top of saying that I should be exterminated, I find that stressful and distracting. Would you mind not doing that, please? We can ask the question of, I'm in the process of answering the question of what kind of person says that in the first place. But that's what I said. And his reply was, yeah, fair enough. And he moderated his language in dealing with me. And not too long after that, I'm in my psychiatrist's office and I'm saying to him, I can get Nazis to be nice to me, but I can't get my father to do it. And so that was started to be an indication to me that maybe I wasn't actually. Obviously, there are things that I said to you that were stupid or offensive, and I was tired or angry or whatever, and I would take them back. But the reality is that if I could get that from an actual Nazi, then maybe I wasn't completely responsible for everything that was wrong in our relationship. That was kind of a clue that I didn't have to accept full responsibility for all of it. And the other thing that happened was, you died. And that is why we now have this very one-sided relationship where I do all the talking. It's nice to have a turn at that. And we're realistically, my prospect of receiving any kind of act of kindness or apology or affection or emotional support from you is zero. You are not going to do any of that because you're dead. And the question is really, really important. While I was motivated by the question, I could suffer the things that I had to suffer, and I could be open-minded, and I could bring the curiosity that you have to have. The power of curiosity in these conversations is immense. Right? Daryl Davis had a question, why do you hate me? And he would not let go until he got an answer to it. And I think the leader of the KKK also had a question pretty quickly, which is, what the hell is going on here? I think he had some genuine curiosity once he understood that Daryl was genuine in terms of like, why do you what is going on here? And now that I don't have the question anymore, my efforts at counter-radicalization are less sincere. They are transparent in their motivation, and people see through me, and it doesn't work. No. There was a guy, I discovered today that I've been blocked by someone who would previously have been like a prospect for, and I was, it was kind of a last fling sort of thing. I was like, I wonder if I can do it with this guy. But I just wasn't motivated enough to tolerate his bullshit, and he's blocked me. My comment on that in my Facebook group was, I'm going to need a smaller violin. Yeah, I'm just over it. But I was going to try and like, I think it's good work to do it. If you have the bug, if you have a question, then what else do you need in order to do this work? And the piece of strategic guidance that I think is kind of surprising potentially is target the leadership. There are two reasons to target the leadership. One is it's a more effective use of your time. Right? Daryl Davis took his question to the head of the KKK in his state, and the entire KKK in his state was disbanded after several years of what I'm going to call work. Right? Daryl will say he was just curious, and that's why it worked. But I'm pretty sure it involved some effort, and I'll talk about some of the costs in a little bit. So you want to, you can get a better return on your investment if you go after leadership. Then there's an even better reason to go after the leadership, which is that you can't go after the foot soldiers. The foot soldiers are not very smart. They are not going to listen very well. They're not going to understand very well. And they don't have questions for you. And you need the other person to have a question. You have to both have questions. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And so you will fail if you go after the foot soldiers. You might succeed if you go after the leaders, because the leaders have got questions. Can I recruit this person? Is often the question that the leader is asking. Can I bring them on board? If I demonstrate a good enough understanding of them, can I bring them across to my side? And one of the risks involved in this work is that they might actually, like, you're trying to recruit them out of whatever they're doing. They're trying to recruit you into whatever they're doing. They might succeed. You need to have some security in terms of your own setup if you're thinking about going after this stuff. Um, so let's talk about the costs then. Yeah, my number of people that I thought were my friends dropped by. I mean, I'm my friends are arty, very progressive people, and I lost most of them, and that hurt, and it made me a really good recruitment prospect for the people that I was trying to counter-radicalize. It was very much a tug of war for a while. And that's not isolated to me. Right? Daryl Davis, who is my hero, I've seen footage of a black man calling him a traitor and being absolutely disgusted with him because he was associating with the KKK. And so I guess part of my plea, less so on behalf of myself, but on behalf of other people who might want to do this work, is to understand that it doesn't actually have to be a war, and that the people who are trying to build peace and understanding need your support, and that if you shun them, if you threaten them, and all of that sort of thing, then you are driving them into the hands of your opponent. And the people who want to do this tend to be smart people who are good communicators. They've got leadership potential. Do you really want them? Do you want to be helping your opponent recruit them? Think about that. Like, seriously. So why am I quitting, and what do I hope to gain from that? I'm quitting because I'm tired. I'm quitting because the question that I want to answer, why do people hurt the people that they love? Why do people who don't intend to hurt people inflict so much harm? I can't pursue that question through counter-radicalization work anymore. That's the biggest reason. It also takes a bunch of effort and a bunch of energy, and it hurts sometimes. I think at my best I had like a 10% success rate. If I was serious about someone, my success rate probably goes up to like 50%. And so you have to, there's losing isn't fun, and I'm less interested in the losses anymore. I'm not as open-minded as I used to be, and I want I want the political aspect of my life to be less exciting. There's other challenges that I would rather focus on in terms of my mental health and getting my career headed back in the kinds of directions that I want it to head in. And yeah, if I'm going to choose, if I've got only so many resources available for coping with rejection and failure, I'd rather put those at work in pursuit of a better job than the one that I've got, which is largely around the house at the moment. I'd rather spend those resources being rejected there than being rejected by assholes on the internet. And I want to talk briefly about a benefit that I'm not looking for. Because there are people who made it pretty clear that they were blackmailing me into ending my association with the Nazis and the transphobes and all of those other people. And it seemed likely that if I would only stop saying these things that they didn't like and associating with these untouchables, that they would welcome me back into the community. And I want to be very clear in terms of saying to those people, I'm glad you're gone and you can stay gone. I don't want you back, because you revealed your concern for humanity and for my humanity when you said agreeing with my political beliefs and keeping me comfortable is far more important than our relationship. And if you can't have that level of discomfort, then you remind me way too much of my father for me to want a relationship with you. And I think that's where we can leave that for the moment. And we'll see what happens next.